Welcome back to another episode of Views from the Top. As always, I'm your host, Scott Sturgeon, founder and senior wealth advisor at Oread Wealth Partners. We are a fee-only fiduciary financial planning and wealth management firm. We work with a variety of different clients, but we have kind of a specialty working a lot with physicians, business owners, and typically with affluent individuals. So if you feel like potentially your finances are maybe not quite where they should be, especially kind of given the new year, by all means, reach out. Be happy to consult with you and kind of offer some insights or guidance or determine if there might be a good fit to work with me and the firm. All that aside, kind of a good, dovetail into kind of today's topic of conversation, 5 things you should immediately consider implementing after January 1st. And I feel like often these videos you'll see online are all the deadline things you have to get done before December 31st to take advantage of the prior tax year. And while there are a lot of really good items in videos like that, I'm not discrediting them by any means, and actually I'll touch on a few of them. If you missed out on them from the prior year, definitely consider implementing either earlier this year or throughout the year to take advantage of them. I digress. 5 things we'll jump into to really get yourself financially prepared for the new year after January 1st. Okay, first thing to do, and this one's critical, you can't start any of the other processes before starting this, and I'll tell you exactly why. The first thing to do to get ready for the new year after January 1st is writing down 3 financial goals. 3 financial goals, that's it. They could be anything. It could be buying a new sweater. It could be saving up for that trip to Hawaii or California or to Kansas City, Missouri. I mean, what a great place to visit. Regardless of what that is, writing it down has a very profound effect on your mental faculties and really registering that goal and making it something that you are now held accountable to, granted holding yourself accountable, but that you actually wrote it down, it's been cataloged, it's been chronicled, and more or less there's no way to then go back and maybe write it in pen. That would be better than going back and erasing it. But regardless, I think we all the time will say, oh, well, I'm gonna, now it's the new year, I'm gonna join that gym, it's gonna cost me $50 a month, but it's gonna be totally worth it because I'm gonna lose 20 pounds this year. Well, that's all great, and maybe you even do get the membership, but then time goes on and you get into February and it's just easier to stay at home and watch Netflix, and I get it. I have this battle with myself daily and I often lose, but I think one of the things in writing it down, you actually you can reference back to it. Maybe write it down and put it somewhere where you're gonna see it almost every day. It's kind of like a constant reminder of this goal that you set for yourself, and in doing so, you hold yourself accountable. And I think you're much more likely to achieve that goal, being that you've actually kind of documented it and set it in place. So I would challenge you to start with 3. I think 3 is a solid amount. And again, any monetary value doesn't necessarily have to be anything profound, but I think definitely writing it down, it's something that's going to be really impactful for you, is so critical to kind of getting that warm, fuzzy feeling of achieving something that you've worked really hard for. So second one is kind of a 3-parter. First, based on the last couple of years, has my net worth grown over time? So net worth, again, just a reminder, more or less all of your assets, less or minus all of your liabilities, your debts and things like that. That kind of gives you your rough net worth. And so I think it's helpful to kind of track that over time, just because at a very basic sense, it kind of gives you a barometer as to whether you are on track for positive growth of your net worth over time. Obviously, that's certainly a goal for many, and oftentimes when we look at planning for the long term, growing that net worth base is huge. It's such a basic concept, but I think one that is easy to overlook or just not easy to tally always. So taking time to look through kind of all of your assets that you have, whether it's your retirement accounts, your home, cars, whatever the case may be, looking at liabilities, do you have any personal expenses, credit cards, mortgages, IOUs, whatever the case may be, all of those items added together, what does a net worth look like, and is it trending in the direction that you want it to? This is actually, it's relatively simple to say, but I think much more harder to actually get a grasp on. But I would certainly challenge you to look at it. I think especially in the new year, right after the new year, that's a great time to determine, kind of for the next 12 months, am I on track for where I'm looking to go over the long term? So step 3 is kind of a tricky one, but I think it's a really good one. And that is take a step back and consider, have you ever actually implemented a tax plan for yourself for a given year or a series of years, kind of based on what your income presently looks like, potentially if you have any large transactions coming up in the next several years. Obviously, I'll throw the major caveat that this is a good one to look at prior to December 31st. That kind of ends the tax year. But if you, for any reason, haven't ever done this, there's no time like the present. And starting right after the first of the year, fresh beginnings, you kind of reset your tax clock, so to speak, for in a lot of ways. So thinking through, what am I going to be making this year? Am I going to have major transactions, whether it's in my investment accounts or any other kind of assets that I might have? Is it rental properties? Is it different personal property I have? Is there going to be tax ramifications if I decide to sell those? And from that, what are some strategies I can implement, maybe just not only in the present day, but potentially down the line, to ideally mitigate those tax liabilities as much as you can. Okay, the fourth financial must-do after the first of the year. Before you file your taxes on April 15th, ideally prior to, or at least pay your tax bill prior to April 15th, take some time and determine, are you able to contribute to any retirement accounts for the prior year prior to that tax deadline? This is a little one that people sometimes miss or overlook. I will note that a lot of CPAs are aware of this. Obviously, this is kind of this is their bread and butter is potentially saving people taxes. But it's something that sometimes gets overlooked, and it's so simple. If you've got a few $1,000s in extra cash sitting around and you're potentially going to have a liability for taxes, why not just fund an IRA or a Roth IRA or even an HSA, a health savings account, for up to whatever the max was for the prior year, just to get, if you have a deduction for those. If you're a higher earner, probably not, but at least you're taking advantage of using that contribution amount for the prior year, and you can then, moving forward in the present year, fill it up, but fill up and make that full contribution amount again. Otherwise, it's kind of lost dollars. You can't really go back, 2 years if you only contributed $2,000 to an IRA, contributing up to the rest of that max contribution amount. So looking at, kind of what contributions you've made in the prior year, you have till April 15th to make some additional contributions and take advantage of some of those structures. And, potentially maybe you don't get a deduction for doing so, but at least you're kind of deferring, you're getting dollars into those tax deferred accounts to take advantage of that kind of that tax-free growth, at least, and reinvestment in the account itself. One I think that gets easily overlooked, I was going to mention, I will note a lot of tax prep softwares I notice now will take note of whether you've done that or not, and make recommendations on, would you like to open an IRA and contribute to it, and then you'll save this much money, which I think is great. But certainly something to, regardless of that, certainly something to keep in mind, and really relatively low-hanging fruit that you can take advantage of. All right, the fifth and final financial must-do after January 1st, and this is actually very simple. Spend time with the people you love and the people that you enjoy being with and who bring you joy. I think this is such a simple one. Maybe a small white lie in saying this isn't in any way financial. Maybe you go out to a nice dinner with a friend you haven't talked to in a while. I think a lot of us in the last 2 years have maybe unintentionally lost some social connections that we used to have. And, I think it's a great time to kind of rethink that a little bit if you haven't talked to someone who maybe you kind of forgot about over the last couple of years. What a great time to reach out to them and go meeting for a coffee, for a drink, for lunch, dinner, whatever the case may be. A relatively small monetary investment, I think one that we could probably all get on board with for, I think those social connections are something that have at a minimum been strained, and at a maximum, I think a lot of them have unfortunately kind of gone by the wayside. But one I think that can be really, really important and impactful for happiness, for enjoying your life and all that kind of stuff. So a heartfelt fifth one, I think it's a good to kind of end on a softer note as opposed to taxes and insurance and investing and all that good stuff. So I will part by saying thank you so much as always for tuning in and watching these videos. Views from the Top is one of the more enjoyable things. I love putting together this kind of stuff. Hopefully you enjoy watching it and at least learn a couple things along the way. If you have comments, questions, any kind of feedback, I love hearing that. I love doing topics and videos on feedback from people, from viewers and things like that. You can obviously contact me directly through my website, oreadwealth.com or oreadwealthpartners.com. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Scott Sturgeon. We will see you next time on Views from the Top.